Hey, everybody, Off the Mic Sports Network here, another edition of Off the Top Rope. Another reaction here to Money in the Bank in the men's match, because we've kind of gone deep into that because there's a lot that came out of this. Very, very meaty Money in the Bank match. One of the, I think, most story driven, and just a ton of things went on in this match. I've talked about, hey, Seth Rollins won, LA Knight didn't. There was, hell, I even thought El Grande Americano actually would have been kind of an interesting choice because they could have done a lot of different and unique things with that. But they went with Seth Rollins. They went with the easy decision. And, I think that this is going to be played out and this is going to be paid off pretty quickly, I think. Much like with Drew McIntyre last year. They're not going to have a Damian Priest style run where basically this is going to go all the way to WrestleMania. This is going to be resolved very quickly. And Triple H was quoted, I'll paraphrase it here, but basically a lot of people have brought this up that Triple H isn't really that big of a fan of the Money in the Bank briefcase. And you're starting to see it come into fruition here in the years since he took over as the sole creative voice and the lead creative voice in WWE. So let's break this down here. Right before Vince McMahon was forced out of the company, he gave the briefcase to Austin Theory, or when he was Theory. And you guys remember how that turned out, right? One of the worst cash-in moments maybe in the history of WWE. He cashed in on Seth Rollins for the United States Championship and did not win. It's one of the worst moments in Money in the Bank history. Austin Theory, it was too soon. Roman Reigns was holding both championships. I get it, okay? 2023, he gives it to Damian Priest, even though LA Knight I thought was the obvious winner. They got bailed out of that situation and really got a lot of content out of it because now they've got stories that have been, littered over their product for the last couple of years when Damian Priest cashed in on Drew McIntyre at WrestleMania. And, then later that year, Drew McIntyre wins the Money in the Bank briefcase, doesn't even wait until the end of the show, cashes in, and gets it ruined by CM Punk. The briefcase is out of the picture. And, with the women's briefcase, I can see it. Io Sky had a decent run with the briefcase. Tiffany Stratton had one of the great cash-ins. We'll see what happens with Naomi. I have a lot of optimism that they maybe will do that. But when it comes to the men, and just in general with the Money in the Bank briefcase, I think Triple H may be telling you guys something. He's not a fan of this. He's not a fan of this. Or at least when he's going to do it, he's not going to just give it to somebody for the sake of giving it to somebody. And to me, that's disappointing because what I will say about Vince McMahon when he booked his Money in the Bank winners, it elevated certain people. It elevated certain people to certain spots. Like Edge, let's look at Edge. It changed Edge's career. Edge is thought of in a completely different limelight because of the Money in the Bank briefcase. Seth Rollins, one of the greatest cash-ins this business has ever seen. Miz won his only two WWE championships because of Money in the Bank. There's been great moments with the Money in the Bank briefcase, and you can do great things. But Triple H, for whatever reason, this is something with him that he wants to use it in a storyline capacity. He doesn't want to use it to elevate stars. And to me, and I understand that, okay, Io Sky, the women, it's been a little bit different. But for the men, for whatever reason, it's really just, it's not worked. It has not gelled. Like Austin Theory, I get it. That was a tough spot. Damian Priest, I don't know why they made that decision. And, it did somewhat elevate Damian Priest. But, last year with Drew McIntyre, I was willing to let that one go. But if they go down the road that I think they're going to go down with Seth Rollins, and this could happen as soon as Monday with the World Heavyweight title being on the line, Jey Uso defending against Gunther. I could totally see Seth Rollins factoring into whatever that match is and him being the world champion. Or I could also see the scenario where whether it's Roman Reigns or it's CM Punk, that they could screw Seth out of that contract and he's not the world champion. I could totally see that scenario playing out. And if that's the case, and we waste if we waste 2 years of this briefcase on quick cash-ins for the men just for the sake of moving storylines, that ain't going to cut it. That ain't going to cut it. You guys had a guy that everybody wanted to see win that briefcase in LA Knight. You had something there to potentially do something. Hell, Penta could have been an interesting choice. Solo Sikoa, He was never going to win it. Some people thought that he might, but then the Jacob Batu thing was really interesting. El Grande Americano, you guys could snicker at this. That actually would have been a really fascinating choice. And you could have developed something out of that with the Chad Gable, El Grande Americano, and, made that something of it. Seth Rollins is the most basic choice of the field here. And it was very obvious the way that they built this up to him getting in the match, to CM Punk not being there, and then CM Punk not even factoring into this. You know where this is going. One of two things is going to happen. Seth is going to cash in potentially as soon as Monday and be the world champion, which he didn't need the briefcase to do. He's Seth freaking Rollins, guys. This guy already has one of the greatest cash-ins of all time. He didn't need to win the briefcase here. But I get it. It's a storyline-driven thing. But Triple H has kind of just told you the way that he manages this thing from all of the years that he's done. And like I said, Austin Theory was not his choice in 2022. That was one of Vince McMahon's last creative decisions that he made as head booker here in WWE. Triple H just does not care about this briefcase when it comes to, developing new stars. They did, let's call it what it is. They did not have a plan for Damian Priest. They did not have a plan for him. I don't know what the decision and logic behind that is. And I like Damian. And it turned out to be an okay decision. But they didn't have a plan for him. Are you kidding me? They waited and waited and waited until WrestleMania. And who's to say that this would have even been the way that they went if it was the traditional plan of CM Punk versus Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 40? That wasn't the plan. It ended up being Drew McIntyre. And then obviously, you factored in the CM Punk layer of this, and it turned into, they made chicken salad out of chicken shit in that situation. But then, last year, Drew McIntyre, he didn't need the briefcase, but I get why they did it, because they wanted to get more heat on the inevitable clash between him and CM Punk. This year, you're going to do the same thing with Seth Rollins? Because either he's winning really quickly or he's going to get screwed over by CM Punk and/or Roman Reigns. That's the way this thing is going. And if you're going to do that the second year in a row, that's just not the way to utilize this briefcase. That's not the correct way to do this. It's just not. There are so many other better ways that they could have handled this situation. It was a great match. They just made the wrong decision. It's the most basic and most simple decision. It was not ambitious. LA Knight would have been an ambitious choice just because, hey, everybody wants to see him, but clearly they don't see him as that guy. They don't. Penta's in that match. Andrade was there, had some cool spots. El Grande Americano and Chad Gable, that would have been, sort of fun, even if it would have been as goofy as hell. But it's just, I don't think Triple H really sees this briefcase really as a vehicle that's really valuable in WWE. And, if I give Vince McMahon one credit, he didn't book these Money in the Bank contracts really well, but whenever he did get them, it somewhat elevated a certain star. And, it wasn't just a cheap way to continue a story. Last year, I was okay with Triple H doing that because, Drew and Punk were seemingly on a collision course to do something, heading into SummerSlam. And it turned into one of the great feuds ever. It's great. What does this really accomplish with Seth Rollins? You've got a King of the Ring tournament coming up. Seth Rollins is so great. He's one of the greats to ever do this. He didn't need that briefcase. He didn't. But they went with the easy choice. I understand that you need to have a heel in possession of it. And, hey, he'll probably cash it in on Monday. We'll see how it goes. And if it's just another pathway for them to have another failed cash in, it is a complete and utter waste of the briefcase. It's one of the great vehicles that they have and one of the great pieces of booking that they can use. But yet, for some reason, Triple H just doesn't use it the right way. So we'll see. We'll see how this all plays out. Maybe I'll be wrong about this. But either way, I don't see how this is good in terms of using, that briefcase to potentially, enhance the product. With LA Knight, you could have had him be the world champion and a lot of people would have been happy. What happens here? Either Seth's going to be the world champion or he's going to get screwed over. Neither one of those options to me feels like really moves the needle. Because at some point we knew Seth was going to be the champion. Come on. James is not going to be the champion forever. there's going to be a heel that needs to take it off of him. So Seth Rollins seems like the logical choice because he's being positioned as the top heel on Raw. I don't know, man. Just really disappointing because I hold Triple H in really high regard in terms of a lot of his decisions. He's not perfect, but this was a misfire. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.